Uh, hey y'all. So I'll post this video where it's just a reading of each of the parts of the story to try and keep them a little shorter. All right. Of the birth of Arthur. Uh, what befell first was love. There was the king, the Pendragon himself, sitting at the great banqueting table, staring at the Lady Igraine as if he were under a spell. When she so much as looked his way, he smiled like a dazzled child. Please, he stammered, would you like? Can I give you? He picked up dishes at random, leaning up, leaning toward her. This would have been very well, except that the Lady Igraine was already married to Corlois, the Duke of Cornwall. She had three fine, nearly grown daughters, and more than that, she was a loyal and faithful wife. She spoke softly to her husband later that night, after they had retired to their quarters. I think, my lord, it would be well if we left this castle very soon. Perhaps this very night, for I have no wish to be dishonored. Let him be king of all England or wherever. The Duke understood her. They gathered their belongings and stole out from the castle at Camelot to ride southward through the night to their own home in Cornwall. Uther was dumbfounded the next morning when he learned when he learned they were gone. He was king. He was Pendragon. Howling, he sent a messenger galloping to Cornwall, summoning the Duke and his wife to return at once. In due time, the messenger returned. The Duke of Cornwall had refused to obey the king's summons. Uther Pendragon stared around at his advisors. A cause for war, he cried. "Oh, my lord!" They all nodded and agreed. Truly, a cause for war. March on him at once. Uther Pendragon was silent for a moment, hooding his eyes. He thought how good it would be to surprise the Duke of Cornwall, finish him off, and then claim Igraine, with no one to say him nay. Except for all his warring, Uther was a decent man. He did not like the idea of ambushing a man so as to take his wife. He frowned, and then he opened his eyes and looked around at his courtiers. "We will send him fair warning," he said. Another messenger rode off to tell Corlois to gird himself and lay in provisions, because in 40 days this time Uther Pendragon was coming. After 40 days, Pendragon gathered his knights together and rode south. His army pitched their pavilions before Cornwallis' castle, Terrabil, and the siege began. Pendragon's catapults lobbed great stones over the walls of the castles, and his archers shot flaming arrows into the embrasures. Fighting men raised ladders against the castle walls and rushed up them. But the Duke of Cornwall was a good fighting man also, and so were his knights. They dumped hot oil and rocks on Uther's men who were climbing the ladders. They sent off flaming arrows of their own and fired rocks. The siege went on until Uther began to go a little crazy. He felt so ill that he took to his bed. He explained to one of his knights that he burned with anger that he could not overcome Corlois. Then his voice grew softer as he admitted, "I burn with love for the Lady Igraine," to which his knight suggested that King Uther seek the assistance of Merlin, the wizard. Uther sent for Merlin, who came in strangely dressed and stood by the king's bed. "Sire," he said, "I know your heart, and I will grant your desires to win Igraine if you will swear a certain vow to me. You must swear after you win Igraine, you will have a child by her. When that child is born, it shall be delivered to me to be raised and nourished as I see fit. Do you swear a, a child by Igraine? It seemed like a dream to Uther. I swear it, he said. And then what befell next was magic. Magic. Late that night, Merlin led Uther to the gate of the castle Tintagel, where Lady Igraine was staying. But as they approached the drawbridge over the moat, guards could not tell that the two who signaled for the bridge to be lowered were not the Duke of Cornwall and one of his knights. The bridge came down. The two walked across it, and the two made their way through the yard and into the castle. Servants hurried with torches to light the way for the man they thought was their duke. Merlin stayed uh, beside Uther until they came to the doors of the lady's chamber. Remember, he said, speak as little as possible and come the moment I call for you in the morning. After that, he turned and left. Uther opened the doors of Lady Igraine's bedchamber and went inside, and that night he did have his heart's desire and held the lady in his arms through the night until the little uh, before dawn, when Merlin came tiptoeing into the room and touched Uther on the shoulder. Uther gave the lady one last kiss and arose and hurried after Merlin out of the castle and back to his own uh, pavilion. He soon learned that one of his knights had killed the Duke of Cornwall when the Duke ventured out of the castle earlier in the night. The same news was brought to Lady Igraine, who stared at the bearer of the tidings. No, she said, no, it is not possible. But she could not bring herself to tell anyone that she had spent the night in the arms of a man she thought was her husband. Of if it had not been he, then who was it? Soon after, the barons of Couloise's kingdom came to Pendragon to ask for peace, and offered him Igraine's hand in marriage. Soon the wedding was being celebrated at Tintagel. The day came when Igraine's child was born, a fine boy. She held him to her, admiring him. Uther leaned over the mother and child, and he admired the infant also. But as the hour came close to midnight, he was ordering what had to be done. The baby was wrapped in cloth of gold, as befitted a king's son. Then he was put in the arms of one of Igraine's ladies. Another lady and two knights were appointed to go with her, and the baby was carried through the dark, cold, echoing halls of the castle to the postern gate. A poorly dressed man was waiting there. The lady with the child had her instructions. She gave the child into the old fellow's arms and watched as he and the child vanished into the night.